But that's not the only engine option that's available. Take it away, voiceover. Superminis are great. They're cheap, they're stylish, and because manufacturers are obsessed with making their cars bigger with each iteration, they're not nearly as small as they used to be. And that's true for this, the latest version of the Volkswagen Polo, which is now about the same size as the previous generation VW Golf. But unlike the Golf, which is the go-to car in the family hatchback world, the Polo has some serious competition. You've got the Ford Fiesta, which is the UK's best-selling car. You've got the Renault Clio, and you've got the Seat Ibiza, which is the same as the Polo when you peel back the skin. So why should you go for a Polo over any of the others? The Polo is the biggest it's ever been, but it's still a small car. Nevertheless, VW has incorporated a few design cues that give it a little bit more presence when it's out on the road. The nose, for instance, sits nice and low, and the grille is really wide, and that really stretches out the width of the car. You've also got these little creases in the bonnet that give it some subtle aggression without being over the top, say like an Ibiza. One thing that's a little bit disappointing is that the headlights are halogen as standard. If you want LEDs, it's a £1,000 upgrade, unless you go for the Polo GTI Plus, where it's thrown in for free. The side profile is pretty generic Supermini, but you've got a couple of creases down the side to give it a more dynamic look. You've also got a small spoiler at the back. Now, this isn't a sports model, but that could trick people into thinking that it's a sports model. The model you see here is the £17,030 Polo Match, which comes with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, plus parking sensors and tinted rear glass. The 19,675 SEL gets navigation, climate control and rain sensors. And above that, the £19,505 R-Line adds 16-inch wheels, LED rear lights and the firm's composition media system. The GTI and GTI Plus models get bigger engines, sporty looks and driving modes, but prices start from over £23,000. As is the case with a lot of VW products, this isn't the most stylish cabin, but it's extremely well built, it's sleek, and it just feels like a premium product. For instance, you've got soft touch plastics here on the top of the dashboard. You've got this beautiful steering wheel that it's really nice to hold and is wrapped in leather. Even the cheaper plastics feel pretty good. You've got nice smooth plastics around here on the center console. Down here it's a little bit scratchier and as well on the door, but nothing that feels flimsy. Storage is pretty good too. You've got two cup holders down here that are these kind of weird octagonal shape, which makes some cups a little bit difficult to fit in, but most stuff should be absolutely fine. There's also a little tray here which you can put your house keys in, and this model clearly doesn't come with an armrest, which is really annoying if you're cruising on a motorway, but you can spec one in if you want to. There's also a little compartment down here where you could put a smartphone, and it's actually got two USB ports, so you and a passenger can charge your phones at the same time. And that's also the connection you'll need for Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. And finishing it off, of course, you've got a pretty decent storage down here in the door bin that's got a massive cup holder in it. All cars come with an 8-inch infotainment system, but they all do slightly different things. So if you were to go for an S, you wouldn't get Apple CarPlay or Android Auto. And you've got to go further up the range to even get navigation. But let's say if you were to go for a Match, which is the second lowest car in the range, you could just hook your phone up through Apple CarPlay or Android Auto and use the Waze app or Apple Maps or Google Maps. The system itself is really slick. It's nice and responsive and very clear. The only problem I have with it is VW has moved over to a predominantly touch-controlled system, so shortcut buttons like radio and media are all done through touch surfaces. I wish they were physical buttons. Last but not least is the instrument cluster. Now, a car at this price point, you would expect it to have analog dials and a digital display, and the Polo has exactly that. You've got your rev counter on the left, the speedo on the right, and sandwiched in the middle is a small TFT display. Now, the display gives you everything you could want, like your speed and your MPG, but it looks really basic in black and white. If anything, it looks like it's been plucked straight from the 1990s. Now, a digital cockpit is available as an optional extra, and they work so well. I would say if you're going to pay for this car in monthly instalments, go for the digital cockpit because it shouldn't add too much to your monthly outgoings. The Polo is a little bit like a TARDIS because it's not a very big car on the outside, but I've got so much room back here. I'm 180 centimetres and I've got, I would say, another
10 to 15 centimetres of headroom still to go. So if you're 6 foot and over, you should be absolutely fine. Legroom's pretty good too. I've got the chair in my driving position and I've got loads of room still to play with. If you're sat in the middle, you might have to move your legs out a little bit because there is a transmission tunnel to deal with. Now this is pretty standard with most Super Minis because they sit quite low to the ground, so not something really to worry about. And last but not least, you've got ISOFIX points, and they're nice and easy to find because they're just at the base of the seats here. The VW Polo has a big boot. In fact, it's one of the biggest boots in its class. And at 351 litres, it's only 30 litres shy of the Volkswagen Golf. The rest of the boot is, well, a pretty conventional boot. The back seats fold down 60-40 to open up even more room. Underneath the boot floor, you've got a spare wheel, some tools, and I guess if you wanted to store some things down there, you could do. And there's a little storage compartment in the bottom left-hand corner. So if you're a really cheap mafia boss and you've just kidnapped somebody, they can have a little drink on their journey to the nearby river. Well, they'll probably get out actually because there's a boot release button in here, but you get the idea. Under the bonnet of our Polo Match Edition here is a 1 litre 3-cylinder petrol engine pumping out 94 brake horsepower. But that's not the only engine option that's available. Take it away, voiceover.
Yes. The Polo's engine lineup consists of a 1 litre 3-cylinder petrol engine available in 79, 94 or 113 brake horsepower form with either automatic or manual transmissions. The GTI meanwhile doubles the displacement to 2 litres and gains an extra cylinder for a total output of 197 bhp. However, the GTI and GTI Plus are only available with auto boxes, which is a bit of a shame.
Every time you get into a Volkswagen product, you always have quite a high level of expectation because VW makes some of the best and most refined cars on the planet. But even I'm surprised at just how good this Polo is. Bearing in mind that you can pick one of these up for just shy of 17 grand, I feel as though I'm in a £30,000 car. Yes, it feels a little cheaper around the doors and also in the centre console, but as the driver, 95% of the time, that's not something to worry about. You're going to be more concerned with what it's like behind the wheel, and it is good. The first thing that springs to mind behind the wheel of this thing is just how refined it is. And that's a term that gets thrown around quite a lot in the industry. It feels refined, and it can be a little ambiguous. But the way I look at refinement is you can't have a great engine and rubbish steering. It's got to be everything. Every little component has to play its part and do its job to perfection. Let's take the steering for instance. In a Super Mini, you don't need anything that's massively communicative. You just need something that's light and easy to throw around. And that's exactly what you get with the Polo. But it's just a little bit more than that. You can tell this comes from the company that also makes the Golf GTI and is the parent company of the firm that makes the Porsche 911, because behind the wheel, this feels so brilliantly sharp and responsive. On the surface, that might not mean a lot if you're just taking this back and forth to the shop. But having a really good steering system lets you drive a car with confidence. There's no ambiguity when you start to turn in. Whatever input that you make on the steering wheel in a Polo, you know that it's going to translate perfectly to what the front wheels are going to do. The same can be said for the engine. So as I mentioned earlier, we're in a Polo Match, and that's got a 1 litre 94 brake horsepower 3-cylinder petrol turbo engine. And on the surface that sounds a little bit gutless, but it's more than up for the job of being nippy around town and also getting up to motorway speeds. I've had no problem with overtaking slower traffic on a motorway and having to make a quick jump from 50 to 70. I would say my only criticism is that it can feel a little bit laggy, so when you put your foot down, you don't get all of the power straight away. There's a noticeable delay between some power and maximum power. Now for somebody like me, I find that quite amusing because it reminds me of old turbocharged cars and it's kind of fun. But if you're the kind of person that is literally just using this as a tool to go from A to B, it might be a little bit annoying. Another seriously impressive aspect of the Polo is just how quiet and calm it is on a motorway. I'm on quite a bumpy and noisy stretch of motorway, and I don't know how it's going to come across on camera. I find my microphone picks up more noise than some other reviewers do. But it is really hushed in here. and it's a really nice place to spend a lot of time if you're on a long car journey. So what would I go for if I was buying a Polo today? Well, there's not a lot I would change on this model actually. Even though this is a match and quite low down the range, it's really quite well equipped. I wouldn't worry too much about getting an infotainment system with sat-nav, because I've tried all different sat-navs from different car makers and none of them are quite as good as the one that you get through the Waze app that you can access either through Apple CarPlay or Android Auto. So the only thing I'll say with that is make sure that you get a match or above to ensure that you've got an infotainment system that supports smartphone integration. The other thing I would change is the instrument cluster. Now, this is more of a personal preference, but I find analog dials with a small little data screen in the center to be just a little bit old hat. And I think if you're getting a car like this, you should go out and treat yourself, up your monthly payments just a little bit and go and get the virtual cockpit, because the one that you get with Volkswagen, and you also get it with Audi and Porsches, is absolutely fantastic. It is so easy to use and it makes a car feel as though it's a decade ahead than the rest of the competition. So I strongly recommend ticking that box on the options list. So why would you go for a Fiesta over a Polo? Well, they're more fun to drive and a bit more communicative through the wheel. So I think that if you're a driving fan, you enjoy being behind the wheel, a Fiesta is probably the car to go for. But if you're wanting something easy and is simple and feels refined and incredibly well built as soon as you touch the steering wheel, I think the Polo is the car to go for. And it'll give you a sense of premiumness that none of its rivals can match. Just remember that because this is a new car doesn't mean that you have to pay new car prices. You can head over to YesAuto.com and get all the latest deals on both new and used VW Polos. And why not subscribe to the channel, because we've got more in-depth reviews like this and some more ridiculous ones.